Welcome to episode 9 of Never Better Pod.
Hey, dude. 9 episodes.
9 episodes. Well, we've kind of recorded 10 at this point, but we had to stitch those two together to make our 8.5 episode. But hopefully we're back in business here.
The lost episode, the lost in translation episode.
Yeah, I'm glad you figured out a way to stitch them both together. I think that worked out well. But yeah, I really enjoyed that episode. I'm definitely feeling a little bit more motivated to move my body, come out and visit you and do some golfing.
Dude, can't wait for our golf trip coming up in a few days here, man. I haven't played around in a while, so
I haven't played around since I was there with you last. So
that'll work greatly to my benefit.
actually, no, I lie. I played a couple rounds here after that. I'm totally lying. But it has been a while since the courses here closed down.
What are we talking about today?
Today, I wanted to go with a bit of a looser structure, but just kind of talk about some current events, the state of the world, social media, all those sort of things, just like everyday life, because in reality, when we're dealing with our mental health, trying to practice our mindfulness, we can talk about these like big issues like our alcohol consumption and dealing with trauma and whatever. But for the most part, what we're actually dealing with is just the regular day-to-day nitty-gritty. So I thought it'd be cool to talk about that.
That's a great idea. My favorite part of our episodes are not the structured topic, but it's the random tangents that we get into. So here's a collection of them.
Like ancient aliens.
Ancient aliens, you name it. Golf.
Totally, man.
Staring into the void.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to talk about was some drama here. I mentioned it to you before we started recording, but there was a big local news story here. I'm not sure how much it kind of trickled throughout the rest of the province or the country, but at 3:45 or something a.m. yesterday, a local like 60-something-year-old man drove his, I think it was like a Sprinter van type thing, onto our bridge here that crosses the lake. So it's the only connection between West Kelowna and Kelowna running along the highway, unless you want to drive all the way around up to Vernon and down back around, which takes a long time. And so he drove his van going like eastbound into Kelowna, and then parked across 2 lanes of the bridge, had apparently like sealed all the doors and stuff, and sent out a splash thing on social media to say like, I'm going to live stream the situation. I'm shutting down the bridge in like protest of the just some kooky stuff like the corruption between, I think he stated, the local RCMP, the Hells Angels, Kelowna Cab Company, and then at some point also threw in the UBCO international students in as part of the conspiracy against him to make him lose millions of dollars. So in some ways, like kind of laughable, but obviously dealing with somebody that's in an extreme mental health crisis. He said that he had explosives in the van, so they had to shut down the highway going both directions, call for the bomb squad to come up from Vancouver. That took many hours. And once the bomb squad got there, checked it out, they found that it was just propane tanks he had in the van. There wasn't any actual, like, I mean, obviously propane tanks can explode, but it's not like he had like made a homemade bomb or something. And so they like towed the van off and opened up the highway again. The guy ended up getting apprehended on the scene pretty early on. And it was interesting taking a read through his massive post he made on Facebook. We somehow
Was he
found the
from
link.
Alberta? That's the
Oh,
dangerous part of Kelowna is your proximity to that conservative province.
yeah, no, there was nothing like necessarily politically motivated behind it. I don't think. I ended up taking a bit of a scroll through his like Facebook page, and in some ways it was kind of sad to see, you're scrolling back through time, you can see the deterioration in his mental health over time. Sounds like somebody who deals with some like road rage issues, a lot of stuff related to that. Beware, Anthony, my friend.
Yeah, dude, road rage incidents do really trigger me. But I gotta say, man, if the police intervened in a mental health crisis and no one was murdered, shot dead, that's progress. That's good. He must have been a white guy.
Yeah, a white 60-year-old bald man. But yeah, that was kind of crazy. I mean, obviously had a huge impact on things here in Kelowna. There's a ton of people who commute across the bridge every day. I was one of those. So very weird to hear about that and feel our city kind of come to a halt. The vibes in town yesterday were really bizarre. Just a strange energy around. think when those sort of incidents happen, it reminded me a little bit of definitely not as extreme, nowhere close to as extreme, but the Boston bombing situation during the Boston Marathon, where those two brothers set off that bomb and stuff, and how it kind of sucked in my attention and made me feel a whole bunch of emotions and stuff. It was in some ways similar. So yeah, it was just like really, really bizarre. I saw lots of discourse online, people in the comment section pointing, like the typical kind of like discourse you get online now, where it's everybody arguing different sides of things, but in the end, we're all kind of arguing for the same thing, which is ridiculously frustrating. But, people arguing that there should be more support for people with mental health issues, which is for sure is the case. But then people arguing like what that support should be.
The last time that I was on that bridge that you talk about was for your wedding. So that shows how overdue I am to visit. And also, Mike was driving us up and his fucking car ran out of gas, dude. What a complete and utter bonehead. I'm safe to say this story because my two besties, Armand and Mike, in the car, they don't fucking listen to my podcast, but that's fine. But yeah, I've never seen Armand so like secretly infuriated with another human being in my life. Like he was fuming. Fortunately, the vehicle behind us was like a mobile gas truck. Like no kidding. The guy like took a pump out of his truck and filled us up, and we were delayed like no less than 10 minutes.
It sounds like in about exactly the same spot too, which is really funny.
Dude, yeah, I bet.
Yeah, anyway, back to this like weird local event here. I don't know. So basically the two sides of the argument where people were saying somebody like that should be getting mental support and end up in an institution, like forcibly, essentially, which obviously has its own red flags. And then a lot of people then arguing the opposite of that, right? Like in terms of our Charter of Rights, you can't forcibly lock someone up in a mental institution and force them to take medications or whatever. But that becomes really tricky when you're dealing with these like extreme mental health crises. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, you didn't dive into this issue as closely as I did, but
well, I think of it as like overarching intervention into people's lives. So it wouldn't be specific to mental health crisis. It would also be for the elderly. It would be for, a number of certain things. Yeah, you get closer and closer into that slippery slope police state, but there are some instances where it would be good to have protocols for that. Like I heard another story actually where there was this elderly lady living in a neighborhood in the States where she was shooting a rifle like out the window randomly, and she was totally like off her rocker, estranged from the family, but there's no process to get her help and you can't force her hand. Like she basically needs to fire that gun and hit someone or take it too far to the point where the police can intervene to get her help. There's no
Yeah, which seems kind of messed up, right? Like we're stuck in this, sort of gray area. I mean, to use a very non-important metaphor, but I'm finding the same thing right now in a lot of the discourse going around, like soccer, watching professional soccer. I'm a big fan. And every single week, there's always some sort of drama about the refs and their like VAR, the video assisted refereeing, and the decisions that they're making. And fans and pundits, commentators, whatever, are getting really upset and worked up about this situation and why it seems like they're still getting calls wrong, even though they've got these video referees and you're putting all these things in place to try and resolve this issue. But at the end of the day, the issue comes down to the way the rules are written. And that's where it's like it's the same as our laws, right? There's some ambiguity within how you interpret those things or then enforce them. And that's going to end up with people then thinking differently or being like, I would have made a decision differently there. And then you end up with this argument and this whole negative discourse around the whole thing. But it really comes down to these gray areas and how do you manage those? It's really, really difficult. Like, yeah, I 100% agree people shouldn't be like unlawfully locked up. But at the same time, as you say, do you wait until the old lady shooting her gun out a window kills someone to then deal with it? Like, we've got to find a better middle ground, maybe.
So if we're handed the keys to the kingdom, what is that middle ground? What would we do? I don't know. Do you mandate mental wellness checks at certain life milestones, or is it like a reporting system? 3 people report you and then you have to go through a state mandated mental wellness check. But then what is mental wellness, and who gets to decide what's mentally well and what's mentally unwell? That's
Yeah.
just if you toe the party line.
Yeah, I think that's
Don't rock the
where
boat.
you sort of leaned towards this comment earlier, but that idea of who do we want to entrust with making those decisions and dealing with those situations. Right now, I think it's a little bit less so here, but right now in the States, for sure, it's like a lot of that is put on the police. And you put the police in these situations where they're dealing with people in mental health crisis, and they're not necessarily specifically trained to deal with that. Whereas if you were to say, for example, invest more heavily in um, the from a public health perspective instead of a public safety perspective, and say you have, the government hires a, fleet of therapists to go out, like they become the first responders in these situations, empower them to help support these people, get them the therapy and support that they need. I think that could only be a benefit. And that comes down to that argument again about like how you distribute public resources and public funds.
Yeah, I think that in terms of first responders, that's absolutely the approach. In mental health crisis, sending people trained as therapists, talking first, not just going guns a blazing. But it seems to me like we need to allocate that funding before it reaches that critical mass, and that person is bringing propane tanks to the bridge or they're shooting their gun out the window.
Yeah.
How do we identify these people before it gets to that point?
Well, that's the thing is like this guy had run-ins with the police. Like that was part of
Oh,
his
okay.
whole thing, right? Is he was complaining this conspiracy with the RCMP and what sounds like you read his whole manifesto, if you wanted to call it that.
Mhm.
And there was many instances where he was involved with the police, but clearly not involved with like a social worker.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's in those earlier instances that maybe this could have been prevented or gotten him the help that he needs instead of perpetuating things down to the point where he's parking a van full of propane tanks on the bridge.
Go hard, man. Like everything is gray and we just so desperately want to make everything black and white. But yeah, what is sanity and who gets to be the judge, jury, and executioner on that? I mean, I guess what right
Mm.
now is that what governs sanity is the laws that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And when you start to break those, then that draws some attention on the matter.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think, say, replacing that response of police with a social worker is, say, step one. But then where do you go from there? That's another situation I think that we're in. I know a lot of people are very frustrated by our justice system at the moment and how people who commit crimes end up very quickly back on the street without any real lasting implications or rehabilitation, really. And
I
like,
hate that we use America as our biggest point of reference all the time, and we're constantly referencing to the craziness that's happening down there. But
yeah, yeah.
thinking of all the Jan 6 riders instead of all the other options is just like, is crazy. He could have pardoned the non-violent participants. He could have requested the justice system reanalyze all of the cases and the sentences for every charged person. There's so many things that he could have done before saying, yeah, absolutely everyone, whether or not you hit a police officer over the head with a baton, whether or
Mm-hmm.
not you haze that security officer into having a heart attack and dying, no matter what role you played in this, you're good to go, man. It's
Yeah, and did you see
crazy.
one of the people released was already shot and killed by
Yeah.
a police officer?
Well, in response to being pardoned, a couple of them said, I would die for you. I would do anything for you. Like it's
Totally. Because imagine they think they're immune to anything, right? Like I can go and do anything. So the guy gets
and
pulled
you just
over
proved they
for
are.
whatever.
Crazy fantasy.
Um, madness.
Fantasy.
Yeah, I know you. Yeah, you mentioned that. Like it is, we keep coming back to the States, but unfortunately, they are our big, ugly southern neighbors, and they do have a massive influence over things here, like both socially, culturally, and politically, economically. Yeah.
And for the most part, like everyone, even on a global scale, paints Canada as the nice guys, but I think that we are just a smaller sample size of them.
In a lot of ways. I think there are
Yeah,
some cultural
like,
differences for sure, but
well, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. California is the population of our entire country, and we have a lot of political and cultural similarities to them.
yeah, but Canada is also pretty culturally diverse. It's easy to say sitting here in BC, but you drive through Alberta, totally different vibe, into Quebec, into the Maritimes. It is a culturally diverse country, not to mention like the immigrants, right? Like I feel in a lot of ways Canadian, but also in some ways slightly a different sliver of being Canadian with my different cultural background.
Yeah, well, patriotism is so ironic for that very same reason. Like Americans love to hang their hat on the Star Spangled Banner and how that they are America, but it's formed by immigrants. By immigrants, it's a melting pot of different cultures. That's how it started, and
Yeah.
we're obviously no different.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, like our history is slightly different, but at the same time, I think the point is,
But in the forming of it, what's educate me if I'm wrong? Is it not a melting pot of European, African, Asian immigrants and indigenous cultures all,
yeah, in a general sense, but in terms of how Canada was formed and our like early history is entirely different. We have the federal, government
Yeah, yeah,
collab
yeah.
between the French Canadians and the British. Our immigration policies have been slightly different. The states obviously went through their whole like civil war to gain independence. Ours is very different. So there
But
are some things that do create a slight differentiation. I think where our similarities come in is the strength of the media in the U.S. and how we get all their TV, like everything. It
I
more
think
has
Canada gets
seeped in
painted.
more over time.
We don't get as bad of a rap as we should a lot of the times. I mean, I don't know if the global scale is just aware of just how bad the residential schools and the genocide of indigenous people were in this country, and then even more so than that, like the Chinese act, like our
Mhm.
treatment of Asian people, like really scary, awful, really bad stuff into the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Internment of the
Yeah,
Japanese here during
yeah,
World
man,
War
yeah,
II.
yeah.
Um, very like tons and tons of instances. I mean,
Evil, evil.
again, it's a smaller population. We're just a smaller player on the world stage. Whether people know about those things overseas, I don't. Maybe in some ways, there definitely have become since I think like the Every Child Matters thing. I do think some of that has probably spread international, but not to the extent that it would if it was an American thing like that. Everybody has their eyes on the States.
My older family members still don't understand the gravity of
Mhm.
residential schools, for instance,
Yeah, yeah.
and like can't wrap their head around the reparations conversation, which I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of people struggle with that, to be honest.
It is a tough one. That is a really tough
Yeah.
one because it's like, how do you do it?
When do
You
you
know,
stop? When are you even? I mean, never.
yeah, yeah. That's it. Well, there's that theory that it takes, what is it, 6 generations or something like that. Um, I'm probably getting that wrong. Maybe it's 4, but and to overcome like a massive societal trauma like that, it would take a certain amount of generations. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember exactly how
More
many
than
it is.
4 or 6. It's been that.
Well, no, when you think of it, like I know people who like grandma was in a residential school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
totally.
that's only 2. But yeah, really, it's this is why like when I went to university, I ended up eventually just kind of funneling into studying political science and anthropology. I find this stuff so interesting. Like, how do we organize and structure our world when there's billions now, like billions of people with, in some ways, these arbitrary, borders dividing us and our cultural differences, and as you say, making up those rules, making up those laws to like to decide what's sane and what's not, and how we should and shouldn't interact with each other. Yeah, it's crazy.
Remember that lame boss that I used to have, and you played on like an intramural sports team with him once? But he had this theory, and he asked us all at lunch one day. He said, "What do you guys think about an underclass society?" And
Oh,
didn't
what,
even know
sorry?
what that meant. An underclass society.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. And then goes on to explain it as, for example, taking a population of people that have less than ideal living situations, like economically struggling, living conditions struggling, bringing them here, and in turn for their servitude, improving their quality of life. Basically, it's like modern slavery, as he described it.
Hmm.
where it does pose like an ethical question. Why is that a bad thing?
Why is that a bad thing?
Well, yeah, why is it a bad thing?
I mean, for
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but why? I
so
know
many
it's a
different
bad thing, but
reasons.
why is it?
Yeah, I mean, I know a good example of where that happens was I was very engrossed in it during the last World Cup in Qatar, because basically Qatar had to build all these like brand new stadiums, hotels, every like massive infrastructure investment to be able to host the World Cup. And so what they did was they took all this migrant labor coming from Africa, essentially, these very, very poor countries, people who had no standard of living, who would move to Qatar at the hopes of like making some money. But then this is where you talk about that modern slavery piece is, okay, they're like technically not as a slave, they're not owned, they have free will, but they're put into these contracts where, you know, they're set up with housing, but then they're required to pay a specific portion of their income for that housing and for their food. And this situation, they essentially get locked into the situation where they're not actually making enough money to really get anywhere. They're all paying to just like exist there, and then their living conditions and the situations that happen can get really extreme. And it is a form of modern slavery. It's the same argument with the like ridiculous number of people in jail in the States, specifically people of color in the States, and how though they are then put to work doing jobs that people don't want to do. So like repaving highways and whatever, and they get paid absolute pittance for doing it. And there are these like for-profit run prisons like that. That in a way, that's modern slavery.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been replaced. So I mean, clearly those things are bad. If that can exist within a country that supposedly has like our charter of rights and freedoms, right? Like everybody needs to have those rights are for all, no matter whether you're a billionaire or you have nothing. And to find little like loopholes or ways to set up those contracts or those rules so those people are essentially stuck in a situation where they don't have that autonomy is so dangerous.
Yeah. So people in power, the people running the show, instead of finding a solution to help their fellow man, they're looking at exploiting them and then painting
Mm-hmm.
it as mutually beneficial.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Okay,
exactly what it
dude.
is.
I got it. I got it. It's that's the same slavery concept, is that's how they would justify the abuse, basically, that they're giving them a job, you know, giving them a home, educating them, teaching them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay. No
Meanwhile,
wonder
they're suffering all
society.
this like abuse. They don't have
Yeah.
the ability to leave and go get another job if they want to. Like it's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that's not the solution.
Totally not. No way. Um, yeah, that's a very, again, like another slippery slope concept where maybe thinking of, you know, and in its best case scenario, if you say that boss, that business owner that was bringing in some migrant labor to do a job, and they were very much thinking, I'm bringing these people out of extreme poverty and giving them an opportunity to live in this country. But then to that the benefit to that business owner being the fact that they can pay that person a pittance because they've just come from some poorer country, with some artificial boundary. Um, like that's so messed up.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the class divide.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I had this conversation with my mom after she had coffee with you, and she was saying that you were expressing some frustration with the like generational differences and the opportunities that older generations have had over us in terms of their, you know, their potentials to the cost of living is it's skewed totally different to the way that
Yeah.
our situation is now.
I also highlighted the fact that that's by design of that generation.
Yes, totally. But I do think pointing the finger at that generation is in some ways wrong, because I do think at the end of the day, it is what you were bringing up before, is it's a class struggle. Those people were also just existing and working within the system that they were subject to different societal and structural pressures that we are also subject to. It's very difficult to blame average Joe for just doing what he did back in the 70s or 80s. You know what I mean?
Well, what's the point of blaming anyways? Because it's not like there's going to be retribution, but you can identify, acknowledge, and accept. And it is a little bit different than that straight comparison of just being of a class or of a time, because there's literally economic legislation passed to protect what they have to a detriment of future generations.
Yeah, I think, but my point is that I think that then becomes a class struggle. Like it's not just down to the generation itself. There are still people within that generation that were marginalized at that time and didn't have the same advantages.
Didn't have the same advantages, but had advantages. Like across the board, the buying power, that's universal from then to now, no matter what class you were in.
Yeah, but they didn't have the I guess like a good example would be some of the and I can't remember the specific details at the moment, but the idea of basically, and I can't remember exactly the timing on this, but it was kind of around that era when basically people of color weren't allowed to purchase properties within suburban areas and were essentially forced to live within urban areas because they weren't being allowed into these outlying communities. In the meantime, the growth in value of those properties in suburban areas has grown exponentially, whereas the value of owning something within an urban center has been much less so. So those people, those minorities didn't experience the same benefits during that era than a different portion of society did. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But it's worse for them now than it was then. So now you're experiencing some less obvious marginalized community biases. And on top of that, the fact that your buying power is a tenth of what it was. I agree with you 100%. Different groups didn't all experience the same benefits of the economic growth of the former generation. But regardless, it was better then than
Yeah, I think for
everyone.
I don't know if I can agree with the idea that
You would have to argue that there is massive unemployment in those marginalized communities. That's the only way the argument would make sense. Just because the buying power is so drastically fucked and swayed now compared to then, they would all have to not have jobs at all in order for.
I mean,
And so they're,
which in a lot of ways was an issue. Like there was
yeah,
the
but
less
not to
opportunity.
not to that mass extent. Like we're talking about the 70s, like marginalized
Yeah,
communities had
yeah,
jobs.
60s, 70s, earlier. Yeah, I guess so. I just think I don't see the framing the issue in that way when I do think at the end of the day, it all just comes down to class struggle.
But why? All classes are equally affected by the buying power, right?
No, they're not. The upper class, they're not.
I mean, not equally affected, but the buying power is the same. And the reflection of what it was in the 70s to what it is now is the same. What you're earning versus what you're spending, that ratio
I
is the
think
same amongst all classes.
no, it's not. There would be differences between classes for sure. It's not like a straight line. I think if you look at the averages for
Okay,
sure, like
okay, because then you want to talk about the 1% and then CEO
yes.
wages that have gone up 9 million% or
Yeah.
whatever, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the
So like
most part, we're yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you know what my point is, right? Like what is it's a distraction to point the finger at somebody who is just entering retirement now, say, for example, or about to enter retirement, and say, you had so much more opportunity than me and I'm fucked. Like, what benefit do we gain from that?
I think it's important to like have that perspective and know where we're at relative to our fellow man.
Yeah, but how does that move things forward? Where do we go from there?
Well, yeah, but I'm having a conversation with your mom, not the leader of the free world. Like, we're point of that conversation isn't necessarily to find a solution. It's to find like commonality or sharing our
And that's for saying
individual experiences.
the commonality is the class struggle, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think if you break down all of these issues that we're having
We share the class.
economically and socially, it comes down to class, just as you were referring to that idea of that 1% continuing to get richer and the rest of us having a smaller and smaller portion of the like money, buying power, wealth,
I want to
whatever.
be able to work minimum wage at a gas station and have a family and a house over my head.
Totally.
You, you,
That's a class struggle.
yeah, like a new one that exists for my class in this generation.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah,
didn't.
but at the end of it, it's a class struggle. At its root, that's a class struggle. Because I
Well,
wholeheartedly
yeah,
agree.
the
Everybody
top of
should
the
be able
pyramid's
to have
fucking
a
everyone
living
over for
wage.
sure.
Every single person should be able to have a living wage no matter what they do. You should, no matter if you are somebody who's putting a benefit, you are selling your labor, you are selling your time, you're selling your work to be a functional member of society. You should be able to afford a place to live. You should be able to afford to feed yourself and keep yourself healthy. And you should be able to afford to then have a family if you want to.
Yeah. Okay.
As
So
a
it
bare
is a
minimum.
class.
Yeah.
It's a class struggle. You're absolutely right. But I find that not everyone, like obviously your mom is super well read and understands the economic crisis that her son and me and others are going through relative to her own. And your mom's really on top of it. So she's not the one that I'm highlighting here. But a lot of older people seem to just not be aware of that altogether. And if
Mm-hmm.
they're not aware of that altogether, then we don't have them on our side in this fight if we ever hope to enact change. So it is
Yeah.
important that
Yeah.
they know that, yeah, this is a shared class struggle, but it's
Mm-hmm.
9 million times more fucked for my kids than it was when I was a kid. And
Yes,
that's
totally.
true. That needs to be known. That needs to be known. That needs to be shouted from the rooftops. So I do think it's important to have that conversation. We're not pointing a finger and blaming, but we are if they're not fucking aware of it. If
Yes.
anyone has the
Which there,
ignorance to not realize that,
yeah,
then they need to be, yeah.
which is a clear difference, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, but we
yeah,
didn't have a bad combo. Like, I don't think
no,
I
no,
was
no,
blaming.
and that's not what she was saying. It was just it was interesting how then your conversation bled into our conversation, and we were talking about it, right? Like in her specific instances, she even though they did have different advantages to us, they're also an entirely different situation because they did give up everything that they had and move to the other side of the world and have to start completely over again
The immigrant
in
experience, for sure.
their mid 30s, right? So that's where I think the key is like pointing a finger at a generation as a whole is like any immigrant family would be like, well, that's not my experience. My experience is totally different.
But their experience was so much better that they did that then than now from a
Yes.
financial
Yeah.
standpoint.
And that's where
Yeah.
the commonality is. That the commonality is in that like we're all part of the same struggle, but realizing and it's being like those frustrations and those difficult things that you experienced during that time, now we're experiencing them even worse. And so we're
Yeah.
all in this together. Like understand,
What kind
remember
of,
what
it's not blame, but it is a comparison. And we are highlighting, but it's worse for me because that's true.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think in a lot of ways, like now is worse for all of us,
Yeah. I mean, especially
and
if
I think
you
it just
didn't
continued to get worse.
optimize on the economic advantages you had in the 70s and 80s, like by buying a house, for instance, or, saving or investing in the .com era. Yeah, for sure. You would be really fucked now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was the other thing I was just thinking? Yeah. And that's where, I mean, to bring it back to sort of current events in a way, and where I do feel like there's now a growing portion of our generation that are being manipulated or getting sucked into the propaganda that is now being spread online and through these like social media platforms that we rely upon, owned by our billionaire overlords, in that they're seeking out the wrong ways to resolve these problems that we're experiencing. It's like you look back through history of politics and when people were better off. It's often
Post
down to
rebellion.
yes, but also these ideas of the like spending on social public projects, right? Like a public safety net for people. That's when people do better off. Not people don't do better off in periods of less government spending and cutting back subsidies for the everyday person, reducing regulations and putting more power and more money into the hands of corporations and businesses, that is not when the average person does better. That is when the average person does worse. But for whatever
Yeah.
reason, people are being manipulated by this idea that if businesses are doing better, we're doing better, which is not the case at all.
When these CEOs are taking all the record fucking profits, dude. Imagine
Exactly.
having
Yeah,
a global pandemic and thinking, here's an opportunity for me to give myself a 9 million% raise and fucking starve my fellow Canadians. Holy shit, Galen
totally.
Weston, you evil, evil crook.
Yeah, like, thanks for that government handout. I'm going to give this to myself and then
Yeah.
lay off a bunch of people.
I think that I am like fully as far as you can go to the left, like socialist. Can you challenge me on something? Like, I can't think of where I would have a more conservative opinion on something. And I'm saying that now because I just want to talk about how we're in this technological golden age, artificial intelligence, machine learning, awesome stuff. Brilliant minds can do amazing things. Can you now use them to work for us? Like, what's the point of all of these amazing accomplishments if we still have to grind away? Well, the
Mm-hmm.
point is the 1% aren't grinding away. They're profiting it from it all. So,
Exactly. And so I think that's where it's so weird, is we're stuck in this era, or this transition, especially with the kind of dawn of AI and the potential there, where I think a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but people are thinking these technological advancements are going to help them, like, be like, oh, okay, great, this will make me do my job better and make things easier for me. But really what's going to end up happening is it's going to end up replacing a lot of people. And then what do we do?
well, that's when universal basic income has to come into play because they can't deal with the homelessness epidemic that would ensue, that would just sully up their ugly streets in this dystopian world. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't see where does the 1%, where do the lizard people lose from giving me measly 3K a month just to cover living expenses? Maybe because then I'm not spending all my time with my head down grinding away and I have the will and the time to organize a rebellion. Maybe that's at least.
Totally, man. And think about what is like the most like leftist thing you can think of is the universal basic income.
Yeah. But if I didn't have to work, I would have a lot more time to consume and participate in capitalism. I'd,
Mm-hmm.
in theory, have more money to do that too. Consume content.
Yeah, and then where does that get us to long term,
Wally?
right? Like, we're getting our little government handout pittance to live on. In the meantime, just continue to give that back to these
Hey,
corporations.
I sign on right now. I'm on board. You can have it right back as long as you give it to me.
Think about the long term. What then happens if they then decide to slowly eke up and raise prices and make certain things that we want to do inaccessible without having
Oh, dude.
more
The
more
class
money?
divide is inevitable. Designer babies, CRISPR, as soon as that starts happening more mainstream, I mean, it probably is. As soon as the rich can make smarter babies, then we're just going to split into two species. How long have we been Homo sapiens now for?
Mm-hmm.
100 is the year where we branch off into something else.
Yeah, and I think that's even when that class divide becomes even more highlighted upon. Like, they're not going to give a book about us.
I got to rewatch that movie In Time with Justin Timberlake, where time on Earth is a currency and everyone has a ticking meter above their head with how many minutes left on Earth they have, and you pay in
Mm-hmm.
minutes. And like, yeah,
Yeah,
millions of the billionaires. And
yeah, yeah. Or like, what's that other one where? I mean, there's a few like this, but when like the wealthy live off planet in like a like satellite type thing, like a big orbiting, like, say they colonize the moon, and then that's where all the wealthy people live, and then the rest of us plebs are stuck down here on the earth just trying to survive.
yeah.
That's a pretty common theme within
Oh,
science
yeah.
fiction.
I don't know what
Yeah,
one that is, but
yeah, can't
yeah.
remember, like Oblivion or something, maybe, I don't know. Mm. But yeah, either way, I don't think things look good long term without, as you say, a major like class struggle revolution. Like, I think universal basic income seems like the answer, but I don't think it is the answer long term. Like we need some way to maintain control over these like corporations, or else we just become like the US is becoming right now, is an oligarchy ruled by billionaires.
Yeah. Someone suggested this to me the other day. I don't know if this is like a going theory from a smart person and I'm just regurgitating it here, but what if there was like a lottery to become a corporation? And I mean, apparently it's like this in a lot of countries. It's not just an entrepreneurial haven like the US or Canada where anyone can start a business. So you have to make like a compelling proposition to be granted a business license, basically. So then,
Mm.
yeah, some control, if it was like democratic control in a real country that actually followed the rules, maybe that would work.
Yeah, my first thought
Imagine
was
if
that
that was
seems
the
like it would
case.
be
Imagine if that
ethically
was the case
corrupted.
with Trump and Doge right now. The companies that would be created and the companies that wouldn't be created, that would be really scary.
It's just
Yeah.
totally. And that's the thing. Like I saw a thing today. It was like a news article about, oh, like the Elon's already cut, you know, 420 million dollars or whatever. Of course, it's like arbitrarily chosen the number 420, and just a typical Elon thing to do. And it's like, oh, is already cut this much, and the argument was people saying like, how can you entrust this person who has historically propped their companies up with government subsidies to then be making decisions on government spending as an unelected official? Like that is such clearly a red flag. Like if you don't know at this point that his whole like Hyperloop tunnel thing was just a ploy to stop the California government from building a high-speed rail between Las Vegas and LA,
To sell
like
more Teslas?
yeah, because he doesn't want high-speed rail. So he just completely subverted the whole thing, said he was going to build this Hyperloop thing, took the government subsidies, crashed, didn't happen. So now people are buying more Teslas. Like
Let's
frustrating.
just form the secret police, hire all our buddies. And I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, I bought this before Elon went crazy on a Tesla. Pretty good.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Although
mean,
I sus-
the writing's been on the wall. Have you seen
totally.
those
Yeah.
interviews of him like back in the PayPal days?
I've seen little snippets here or there, but not recently. And but I mean, even take his history, right? Like you, and I know a lot of people are with this whole like Sieg Heil thing. People are pointing towards his history because he's like South African at the end of the day. His dad owned an emerald mine, so was an extreme beneficiary of apartheid. So I think those beliefs have been ingrained in him from a child. He sees that as a benefit to him, which, as the world's richest person, for sure.
Dude, we know that racism is generationally entrenched. That's studied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's probably only benefited from it in his life. So
Yeah.
it's like never been told no.
Yeah, one
Spoiled
thing
little
I didn't
boy.
know, but I saw was that he's like not actually the founder of Tesla. He like bought Tesla and then did like some sort of like legal case to allow him the ability to refer to himself as the founder, but he isn't actually. It was like founded by two other guys.
Interesting.
Scam artist.
That guy.
Yeah. Which is it's such a in some ways a funny 180. There was that period of time in like early Tesla days where he I think was like in some ways a bit of like a culture icon, kind of like a, you know, he's would always get brought up in like rap songs and stuff like that.
I liked him when he smoked weed. And for a while, like, you would probably call him more of a liberal in his early political days.
Well, that was the scam, right? He sold it as these things. I'm going to build this hyperloop. I'm going to do this. I have this like electric vehicle company, and now that he's the richest man in the world and has the power, it's come full circle. And he's like, haha.
Dude, richest man in the world, sitting on the president's lap.
Mm-hmm, totally. Although I think it's more Trump sitting on his lap. If I'm honest,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think I
yeah,
know who's pulling the strings there.
yeah. Well, because Trump doesn't have $1 trillion. He's in debt.
Mm-hmm. Although I saw something the other day, like how much money he made during his first presidency. It was like insane.
Yeah, just in merch sales.
It's like
Dark
a
MAGA.
$300 gold sneakers or whatever.
Dude, I want to talk to Snoop Dogg and ask him what he was thinking. I'm going to go to the driving range after this and hit
Nice.
90 balls, just driver only. Really got to get the driver dialed, dude. Really can't hit the fucking driver, man.
Uh,
Um,
that's funny.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Today I'm gonna focus on square club face to the path and just trying to smack it straight.
yeah. Honestly, dude, I've heard this before, and maybe it's that like speed golf Rob guy or whatever his name is. But in some ways, like just think about hitting it as hard as you can. Like start there when you're still like learning. Like you're for sure still within like the learning phase. It takes years and years and years. But like that is in some ways, I think when you can learn the most is just trying to absolutely smash it.
I'll hurt myself doing that. Inside of 120, I feel like good at golf.
That's great. That's the toughest part of the game because you will like those long irons and drivers like that'll come with time. It is very much as time. It's building up that muscle memory. It does. Yeah, I think when initially people think the like your long irons are the hardest things to hit. So it just takes time,
Hmm.
repetition.
Yeah. The other day at the range, it was my first range session after coming back from Mexico, and I thought like everything was broken because I worked my way through and I did my wedges and they were great. And then I went to hit my 9 iron and I fucking couldn't make contact. And then I realized it was my six. So that was a really good relief. That was a really good relief.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think the best golfer can hit their 6 iron if they set up like their nine.
Yeah, no,
So
it's totally different.
yeah.
I get this weird thing sometimes when I like, am not playing regularly, but randomly I'll like stand over a sand wedge and I shank it like every time, and then it'll go away. Like it's the most random thing. Like I'm not sure what's going on in my head when I'm just that like out of practice, but it's
Yeah.
the most frustrating thing. I played this course I had never played before, but driven past 100 times in the fall, just after I'd been out there golfing with you. And there's this one specific road hole, like par three, and I've just dreamed about hitting a nice little soft sand wedge into that green for like 15 years. And I finally had the chance and shit. I was like, where did that come from? Golf's so weird.
So I was gonna say every match we play together, I'll just take forward tees and you'll take back tees, and I won't take a drop for shanked tee shot, and you will.
Well, I don't want to, only want to take one if it's like,
Yeah,
that.
you can take them whenever you want to.
No, but I mean, like, I don't want to be like, oh, I hit it in the water or whatever. That's not when I would use one. It's that this like, oh, I'm so out of practice. I just completely messed that swing up, like
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna be using my free tee shots when I hit it 20 yards.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, like
yeah,
a complete miss it because I'm learning to drive, and it'll be on driver tee boxes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, I think that's a fun idea. I like it specifically for like when we go play in like a long course because that
Yeah,
some of those holes end up being such a massive difference. Like what was that one that I texted you about? It was like your shot would be
130.
147 and mine would be 235 or something.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that'll be sweet. I don't think that like Cedar Hill only has one tee box right now.
Mm,
I've never played Olympic View, so
yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how the swing feels. I'm not feeling like overly confident at the moment, but trying not to let that play into my mind because a lot of it's just mental. But I think it'll feel different once I get on the driving range. I did notice it was I posted actually on like our TikTok, but uh like slow mo of my swing at one point. I think it was my like first or second day back at the range when I knew I was coming out to visit you last time. And I hadn't swung a club in like a year or something. And I realized one thing I'm doing because at like first glance, I think I was like, oh, my swing looked great. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Like I'm very happy with that. But one thing I'm doing is I'll take it back, the club back on like one plane, and if you follow the club head, it's coming back like on a good inside trajectory, like right where I would want it to be coming. But then when I'm coming down, I don't know if it's because I'm like I've lost some flexibility or whatever, but I'm then kind of coming down a little bit over the top, and then it's force. And I think it's me trying to like straighten it out, because my tendency has always been a big draw. So if
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like
Well,
if
that's
I'm
good.
going,
You want that.
yeah, but I feel like what I do in my mind is like I worry about coming too far inside out and then hitting it with a big draw. So to try and straighten it out a little bit, I try and bring my downswing a little bit more over the top to line it up a bit straighter. And then I end up pushing it to the left a little bit and just lose some accuracy.
You gained all that just from watching your swing video?
When I was younger, I had a subscription to Golf Digest and would like obsessively, when they you do the photos of a swing,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so you
Yeah,
get like
yeah.
every single stage, it's like obsessively analyze those. So it's like that's again things that just like come with time and after reading articles and obsessing over the game, trying to get better.
Yeah.
It helped too because I saw a thing that was if you're coming like a steeper downswing like that, that's I have a tendency to catch it on the toe as well, and apparently that's one of the things that'll do that. So I really want to try working on keeping that plane the same, going up and down again on that same plane. So keeping a little bit more inside. I've just got to then figure out if I do start hitting these like massive duck hooks, what do I do then to fix it? I don't know. I got to figure that out.
It's easy to focus on. That'll be one good range session.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think I'll be feeling it out, but I do think it's linked to just my being older and less flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. You told me to record my swing, and I'm sure that would be really good. I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. I feel
Dude,
kind of
got to do it every
dorky
time.
about setting a tripod up, but I should just do it.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay. Should we go into the wrap up period of this weekly affirmations?
yeah, sure.
Or did you have some more current events to discuss?
No. The only other things I wanted to discuss is like to bring it back to like mental health a little bit is the ever since the Sieg Heil. But one thing I've been doing to like protect my mental health is I felt like leaning into nostalgic things or things that make me feel good. Like when I felt like life and the world was better. So I made this like arbitrary decision that I'm only going to consume media that was made or put out like before the advent of social media. So for me, like mostly focusing on the 90s. So I've exclusively only been listening to 90s music or watching 90s movies and TV shows. And I'm absolutely loving it. It's so fun. That might be like, I don't know if it's the most healthy thing, like compartmentalizing and being like, I'm just not going to try and focus on or think about current events too much, but it feels like such a fun way to combat those like feelings of frustration with the world, like watching a show. Like I've been watching Dawson's Creek in the background when I've been like doing some
Nice.
work and like drawing on the iPad and stuff. And it's just so, like nobody has cell phones. It's just like their problems are so different. Like everything feels like there's still complex issues, but if they just feel so much more real, you know what I mean? I feel like we're living in this like digital apocalypse right now. I don't know. Don't like it.
Yeah. So many people talk about how this is like a experience that's felt in every generation too. Like,
Mm.
this phenomenon that, wow, things have never been this bad, like meaning current events. And
Yeah.
like, so for our parents, there were active genocides going on in the world while the Israel-Palestine conflict was still happening. There was
I
coast
think
of,
that the difference is that you wouldn't get it shoved into your face at
yeah.
7 a.m. when you wake up in the morning and open your phone and start scrolling on social media. It's like, oh, dead babies. Sweet. Great way to start the day.
So do you think it is no worse than before? It's just the media is making it fucked then? There was also a
Yeah.
period when weren't like political leaders getting assassinated left, right, and center? Like,
Yeah, there's obviously been horrible things throughout history, but I do think you see it so much more now. You feel it so much more with like that level of communication between places. I think in a lot of ways,
yeah,
because of the advancement we have made, still making these like horrific mistakes
yeah,
feels worse, you know? I think about living this very safe and comfortable life here in Canada and having essentially all that I need, but like somebody's getting bombed and murdered on the other side of the world for what is essentially economic reasons. Like, fuck that. I don't want that
Yeah.
in the world.
So we're less ignorant now politically and no, everything's worse.
I mean, I do think I actually saw this great video the other day, and it was somebody having a conversation with herself, like she was playing both characters, but one was her therapist and the other one was just her. And she was trying to explain this feeling of like dread and frustration and feeling overwhelmed. And it basically broke down very much what I feel is the state of the world. And if you want to focus on one thing, focusing on climate change and this like impending, and we're currently living the early stages of these sorts of things, like the fires in LA,
Mass
like
pollution event.
completely wiping out things. Like that sort of stuff is only going to get better. Like that one quote that I'm sure you've seen it online as well, but climate change is this like ever increasing situation of watching these disasters take place on your phone as they creep closer and closer to you until eventually you're the one filming it. That feeling of frustration of seeing this stuff happen, understanding the scientific consensus. None of this is like we figured it out. We know what's going to happen. This is real. It's happening. But for whatever reason, there's this still large political voice and these people that are getting elected into power that deny that these things exist and are actively taking steps to make the situation worse. And that just leads to this feeling of powerlessness and, again, frustration, feeling overwhelmed of like, what can I do? I'm just this, insignificant being living in this small town that in the grand scheme of things, like doesn't really mean much, but there's this whole collective of billions of other people out there that feel the same way, but we're in some ways powerless to do anything about it. It's really, really frustrating.
So the government had it right. They should have censored everything and kept us in this warm, cozy bubble where we could just slave away.
Or like, let's
Ignorance is bliss.
stop voting people into power that fucking deny these things exist. Like if you and it's the frustrating thing for me is the economic implications of climate change as well. Like these are massive issues that we're just ignoring.
It's sunny out there today, January 28th. And Vic, how about you?
And zero snow here still.
Zero.
And it's like we've barely gotten temperatures. Like I don't think we've gotten to negative double digits yet. Like I think the coldest I've noticed overnight was like -9 maybe. It's cold, but for here, like typically at this point, we get spells that get close to, -25, -26 or whatever. So it's been and then the snowing in Florida. You can't deny that these things are happening, and we all know the reason why. But do you still have like a large portion of the population out there thinking that wind turbines are bad?
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
I had this like thought the other day, and it came up in like some conversations that we had. Obviously, right now we're doing this podcast, trying to promote the podcast, using social media to do that, and this like feel like a fight with the algorithm to design our videos away and post in a way to get more engagement, to get more eyes on what we're doing, and through that you end up seeking out information within these social media platforms on how to increase engagement. So then you start doing those things, but then
Shock and outrage content.
But then your algorithm starts to show you more videos on how to increase your engagement. And those are the videos that are getting increased engagement and eyes on them. So it's like I ended up at this point where it's like, do we then post a video on how to increase your engagement to get more engagement? And I thought it'd be really funny to write this like dystopian novella about the trajectory of social media becoming a point where we're all only posting videos of how to increase more engagement. It just becomes this like echo chamber of the same thing. It's like, it just made me so frustrated. I've just seen like people I know that work, like marketing, doing social media stuff like I do.
I think that's what Zucks comes to.
But it's like, yeah, I've just seen more people like expressing frustration with the like algorithm and stuff. And I'm just like, how much of our like thought and minds are devoted to thinking about this goddamn algorithm that just like dictates what we're fed? Like,
I think that's why I chose to make the clip of my hearing the call of the void, wanting to jump off the building because I wondered if that would get shock and outrage content.
Dude, totally.
I should have put a clickbait trigger warning in the beginning saying like, oh my God, wait to the end. He actually jumps or something.
Yes. And that's the kind that's the stuff that when I see it on social media, I'm like, I hate this. This isn't providing me any value. I despise it. Why did I just waste 30 seconds watching this video? Like, I hate myself for it. You know,
There's
like, it's so
one
weird.
golf influencer who rates bags, and his whole stick is like, in the beginning, he'll finally a 10 out of 10 bag, and then the whole video will go by and he won't rate a 10 out of 10 bag.
Dude. Yeah. That guy annoys the shit out of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's what keeps showing up in your feed because people are getting sucked into the same thing. And I'm like, what value is this providing at this point? Like, I don't like it.
What value are we providing? I hope. Yeah.
But you know, and then I just like, oh, I'm gonna go watch. I'm gonna go watch Dawson's Creek and listen to the Counting Crows and.
Yeah, dude. Drink a Mountain Dew.
Sunny D.
Oh, yeah, dude. They named that after you.
I like that. That's first reference. Take it. But yeah, anyway, those are just all the random things on my mind that I wanted to talk about. But I can bring over some leftist literature for you if you like. I've got a few things on the shelf behind me.
I can't read, and I think I'm radicalized enough as it is. Do you know what I actually want? I want some compelling right media to check myself before I wreck myself, you know? I want to hear a view come up where I have a more conservative opinion than the general public on.
Do you know what I'm intrigued by? I was thinking about this the other day.
How about transgender athletes?
Where does your opinion lie on that?
Dude, I don't know, man. It's a tough one.
Left, I'm like very into just let them compete.
Well, exactly, yeah. Or I choose left for L for love, and just whoever the opinions on the matter, whatever they say, like I'm on board with it and I'll support and I'll be an ally. But then like reptilian primate brain is like, well
what?
I don't know, no comment.
Yeah. For me, it's like going back to talking about fucking the rules of soccer and VAR and whatever we were talking about, that like gray area of rules and laws. That's for me what I find difficult about the like trans athlete argument is, where do you draw the line? So currently we draw the line essentially with gender. So social construct. If you identify as a male or identify as we do it by sex, opposite. We do it by like biological requirements. But then people have come in and said, no, this should be a gender thing. So if you are a biological female, but you identify as a male, you should be able to compete in a male sporting event. So it's like, sure, fine. But then you end up in this situation where gender is a spectrum. Within that category of male, female, there's a whole whack of different options or not really options, but you know what I mean? Like different ways people feel and identify themselves within that spectrum. But so then people say, okay, well then let's not do it based on gender. Let's only do it based on your biological sex, whether you're male and female. But then that is in instances ambiguous as well. There's like sex can also be a spectrum. It's less so than gender, but you know, how are you breaking it down? Are you breaking it down based on organs entirely? In which case that's always not clear cut, male or female. There's intersexed people. So are you breaking it down based on your chromosomes? But that's not always XX, XY. Like there's other things within that as well. So then do you break it down to testosterone levels? But like some people can be fully biologically female, but have a naturally higher testosterone. So like it's a gray area. Where do you draw the line? And I don't think anybody at this point has been able to offer the most obvious, like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is where you draw the line. This is blah, blah, blah. This is on this side. This is on that side, because it's all essentially arbitrary. What we determine is male or female. So I think we just scrap the whole fucking idea and either just let everybody compete and say, fuck it, or you create a male, female, and an open category and like anybody can compete in the open category. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's such a, at the end of the day,
Yeah,
it's just fucking sports. Like I get it. I understand the argument from the right for sure that if somebody is a um, biologically very feminine and they're trying to compete against somebody that is identifies as a female but has some very strongly masculine, like, you know, things like that, that's challenging, and girls who have historically been marginalized in these instances shouldn't have to suffer for that. But if you want to talk about marginalized people, trans people get it the worst of anyone. So like that's just, it's just this gray area, and it becomes like, how do we define things and where do we draw the line, and to trying to be fair to everyone, and there's no right answer. And yeah, I don't know, but I think everyone should be allowed to compete. That is the bottom line.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Everyone should be able to compete. I follow, or I don't follow, came across my feed. So, you know me, I would never formulate a core belief over a Netflix special or a TikTok clip. But I should fact check this right now. This trans woman who's on the LPGA, or maybe not even the LPGA, just competes professionally or semi professionally in golf,
Mm-hmm.
posted this video in response to, like, obviously, it's driving engagement because it's a polarizing topic talking about transgender athletes in sports. So she posts a video saying, this is how far I can drive the ball. It's 320 yards. And then she says, I would outdrive everyone on the LPGA by 40 yards. And then she says, this is how I swing in competition. Like, super slow, just knocks one out there, like, 260 or something. Swing speed related. That's kind of, uh, that's the person who gets the say in the matter, identifying potential unfairness and removing themselves from the
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and as I say, then you get into like, where's the line drawn? Like the advantages that Michael Phelps had, you know, with his double jointed shoulders or whatever it was that
yeah
gave him an
web.
advantage in certain events. Then there was that like Ian Thorpe guy, the Australian swimmer that I think had like almost kind of like webbed toes, kind of. He had like big feet and they had like a little bit of webbing between his toes that obviously that's a biological advantage. So even within just the straight like biological men's category, like some people are going to have biological advantages. That's the way sports and the way the world works. So does that mean that like Michael Phelps should not have been allowed to compete because he had an unfair biological advantage? Like, no.
One thing that I know for sure is that no athlete, or specifically no transgender athlete, is maliciously manipulating their categories in which they compete in to get an unfair advantage against anybody. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
once again, yeah, you never know what your neighbor is going through, and always choose the side of love. And
Mm-hmm.
why bother to hold the space in your brain to care about an opinion that doesn't involve you? It's not about you. I definitely want to be an ally. The other day, some guys on my soccer team were talking of having the pronoun debate, specifically in reference to their kids in elementary school at admissions. They didn't like that was even posed as a question, and I didn't bother speaking up. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it wasn't the right time, right place, but I
Yeah.
was a little bit, I guess, regretful that, if I want to say that I want to be an ally, that was an opportunity to,
Yeah.
speak up. And
Yeah, I had a similar instance when my grandma's computer was on its last legs. It was pretty old, so I helped her buy a new one. Took her down to Best Buy to pick it up, and I misgendered the person at the till when I turned to my grandma and said like, "Oh, she said she's just gonna go get the computer from the back or something." And then I saw after when the person returned that on their name tag it had they them, and I felt like it was obviously it was just a mistake. I didn't notice the name tag initially, and I felt really bad about it, and I feel like I should have just owned up in the time, be like, oh, sorry, if you heard me refer to you as a she to my grandma, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to.
at what point does that become patronizing too, though? Because, like, they have to acknowledge that was a careless mistake and not a directly intentional thing.
I think
So,
that's,
like,
and that's where it becomes how you
yeah,
do it. And like, and then in the moment, I was like, I don't know how to phrase this, so I didn't say anything, and I don't even know if
yeah,
they heard me anyway.
yeah.
But it was a bit of an awkward moment where I was like, oh, maybe I could have handled that differently. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to have a maybe. And again, everybody's different. Maybe one person would find that patronizing and another wouldn't. It's so hard.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But I don't understand the anti-pronoun rhetoric. Like, what difference does it make to you if
And
that
when
makes somebody
people
feel
try and
better?
make it
Like,
a grammar defense, they just don't understand grammar.
yes, totally. So they don't
Like,
understand grammar, first of all. But then, yeah, then it just becomes hateful. Like, it's like, why do you care how
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else refers to themselves,
exactly.
like, or wants to be referred to? Like, what difference does it make to you? Who gives a fuck? Like,
I can really get behind a description of non-binary that I've heard of just not adhering to society's standards of the woman label or the man label.
mhm.
And, that makes sense to me. That's not
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no
it's
big
it's
deal.
one thing that sometimes I, and it's different now, which is, yeah, different now that we're married, but there were definitely times where I would refer to Sarah as my partner before, like before when we were engaged or we were just dating. It just, for one, like it felt like a better description, like girlfriend didn't feel like enough of a descriptor of this person in my life. And so in some, like, partner was just a great, like, gender neutral open term. And there was definitely times where, like, yeah, maybe I did get a bit of a joy out of saying partner and then watch the person that I was talking to kind of squirm to think, oh, is it a male or a female? Because, like, at the end, as I say, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know, who cares? Just
Exactly.
let people love they want to love, and be referred to how they want to be referred to, and what fucking difference does it make to you in the end anyway?
Yeah. And we'll still be here running our mouths about stuff that we don't know about, but
That's
with
about, like,
with
just
love
be
in our
like,
heart.
just be
And
nice, just be like a good,
yeah,
nice
yeah, yeah, yeah,
person,
exactly.
whatever. But maybe that's a good transition to um
Peace and love.
our weekly affirmations there, since because we've
Yeah,
been going
let's
for a
do it.
while.
Let's do it.
So I can get us started off with my goal for last week. I wanted to, like, complete some just like random chores, the to-do list that's been building up around the house, and I unfortunately have not done that. I'm gonna try and keep it going. I've been a little bit distracted with updating my resume and applying for jobs, and trying to pick up some little odd jobs here and there to keep the income coming in. So it's been a little bit difficult to tackle some of those tasks, but I have been still kind of chipping away at things here. But gotta keep that going. How about you? I don't remember what your goal for last week was, so remind me.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad that you didn't accomplish yours because I didn't do mine either. And mine was really easy. I just had brought my sketchbook on vacation and
Mm.
hadn't used it at the time of our last episode. So I was like, I want to do a watercolor or a drawing. And it stayed in my suitcase the whole time. Too busy walking around, exploring. Yeah, didn't have that much horizontal time the whole trip. So that's what I will call it as my excuse. But anyways,
No, honestly, I think again, we talked about this a little bit last week, but times to give yourself grace. And I think that is one of them for sure. I've always had this desire while on vacation to write like a little journal at the end of every day of, oh, this is what I did. And so you don't forget some of those small details and never end up doing it. You maybe do it for the first day or two, and then you're just enjoying yourself and living in the moment. So I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing. You've expressed and, like, know your desire to do that some more, so you'll keep that in your mind. But I think you were living in the moment and made the most of your trips.
well said, man. Thanks for
Yeah.
that.
What do we have next on the list here? Grateful for me this week, it has been cute. We're both kind of in this funny situation right now where we are habitating with our grandmothers, which is
Mhm.
kind of funny. But I've really been enjoying, like, getting to spend more time with my grandma. It's one of the things it put into perspective for me a little bit when I first moved back to Kelowna in 2018. And that was in May, and my grandpa passed away in August of 2018. And one of the things that I reflect on so often is I'm so glad that I made that move at the time, even though it was challenging. And I think in some ways I I definitely miss Victoria, and especially our friend group. But I will never ever ever regret that time that I got to spend with my grandpa. And so I'm feeling a very similar sort of feelings right now, living with my grandma, and getting some simple, easy time with her. She's been doing some, like just decluttering and cleaning up of stuff that she's collected over the years here, and pulling out like old books that my grandpa had. And he worked at started off as an apprentice. So this is like very old school. Started off as an apprentice and worked at a newspaper company for his entire career. Only worked at one place. So he's
Yeah.
got all these cool old like books referencing like the major stories over a 50-year period within South Africa, that you can like flip back all like the old articles. And some of the he liked books a lot and different things. Like he was obsessed with cricket, so like cool old like books on cricket with some amazing like graphic design and stuff in them. Hearing all her old stories, just like cool stories I've never heard before. So feeling like very grateful to her and the way that, you know, she's been supporting me since I've been living here, and then getting to hear all her old stories and stuff. It's been really cool. So very, very grateful for that.
That's awesome, man. I love that. Yeah, I feel similarly about living here with my grandma. And here this whole time, I thought that it was Sarah's business keeping you up in Kelowna, but now I just got to wait for your grand to die.
That is also Sarah's business, especially because she is by
The breadwinner.
far the major breadwinner in our household right now. So
Well,
definitely not going anywhere soon.
knock on wood, hope Granny's got another decade in her at least, both of ours.
But yeah, for sure. I'm convinced that it's so funny. This might not sound very complimentary, but I've always envisioned her in a way like if she were to be an animal, she would be a rhino. Because to me, she's just like so strong, and in some ways, like kind of stubborn in her beliefs, and like I, you know, just feel like she's gonna live forever. And yeah, she's like this cool, like matriarchal rhino in my mind.
Do you think that your grandparents were racist at any point in their lives?
No, like I guess you met my grandpa when you came up here for my 30th birthday at least,
Yeah, yeah.
but just like the most like sweet old man. There's actually a really cool story that I heard years ago now, but how he was very, very supportive of a trans colleague back in like the 60s or something, and ended up like supporting this person, and eventually like promoting, keeping them, like, you know, supporting them through the company, promoting them, whatever, keeping an eye on this person and being a support person for them, which was, you know, really cool to hear randomly out of the blue. I can't remember how it came up in conversation, but I was just like, wow, you know, like that's very forward thinking for somebody of that era. And I do think he was very much somebody who did everything with love and kindness. He was the father of 3 girls. And so I don't know if that like impacted who he was as a person after like raising 3 girls, or if he was just kind of always that way, but very, very much like a loving individual. So I don't foresee. I mean, of course, I think there is some societal, like inherent things that can be like, if I were to completely analyze like my history and making stupid jokes as a kid that were racist, like, yeah, I did that. I will say like that was a mistake. I regret those things. I was a
Did
kid
you
and
learn them from your dad and your grandpa?
no, just heard
Yeah,
them at school and then regurgitated them. But you know, it's yeah. But no, I don't think they were. I think they were actively, maybe not like political warriors on the other end of the spectrum, but just lived their lives in a way that was loving and kind to all.
yeah. Good.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you. I buy it. Yeah. Yeah. My dad would be the guy telling those off-color jokes, like the family dinner table when we were kids.
Yeah.
It's a disease. It spreads like poison.
Yeah, I think the thing for I find it like disappointing. I think when it starts with those jokes, and that's what like I actually saw a thing earlier, somebody talking about Elon and how he's such a troll, and he just did the Sea Kyle as like to rile people up or whatever. But you know, saying
Context.
like that's how these things start. You know, it starts as a joke, and you don't understand the impact that the doing those things has on people, and it's not kind and it's not nice. So shouldn't do it.
You're grateful for your grandma. I'm grateful for being born in Canada, living in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah. So we can complain until the cows come home about our generational disadvantages, but there's not too many other places in the world I would rather be. Maybe if I had
100%.
endless money, like a beach villa in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Canada's pretty great though.
Yeah, when I really think about it in terms of like actually living somewhere and trying to make a little life for myself and, you know, feel safe and not have to worry about security and stuff like that, there's very few places that I would consider above where we are, for sure.
We did pick the absolute most expensive part of it by a landslide, though.
Because it's also the nicest.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. There's also, with like expense comes opportunity too, though. Conversation I was having with some people at book
That's
club a
very
little while ago.
capitalist. Yeah.
But I think that is just, it's just a reality. Like, I'm not saying I support that. That's just the reality of how it is. You're going to get, like, your income is going to be higher in a city that costs more to live in. Like, it's just,
You'd hope, dude. You'd hope. What if we find out that ratio is fucking all fucked too?
Then we moved the country.
Fucking
Although
all.
I feel like I'm somewhere sort of in between. This is pretty much the
Yeah.
country.
Did you delight in anything?
I did. Very, very much delighted. We teased it a little bit in the last episode, but I was saying that Sarah and I kind of ended up sort of pooling our air miles together, and she got a new iPad, and then I bought the pencil to go along with it. And I was talking about how I'm not somebody who has any artistic skill, but has felt a desire to express myself artistically in the past, but haven't felt like I get frustrated with the medium of like putting pencil to paper. Because I just felt like I couldn't get across like what was in my mind, and took some of your suggestions. One of the things I've been doing is using Procreate and essentially just like tracing stuff and then starting from there, adding different colors, whatever, having some fun with it. And I've found it so incredibly meditative. It's been so good for my anxiety. I basically haven't had like any anxiety in the last week since we got it, because if I start to feel like overwhelmed or whatever, I just take a little moment of pause and like mess around on the iPad for a little bit. And I feel like I'm learning, which is cool. Like, I have a newfound appreciation for tattoo artists and how they like pull a straight line in a tattoo. Like, holy cow, that is hard. And that's just like years of practice and muscle memory. And then like I'm just tracing. So for them to even like start a design from scratch and understand perspective and all those sort of things.
We trace a lot.
They do trace a lot, but they're typically they're going to do a design, and then like the good ones anyway, they're going to do a design, and then obviously they're stenciling it on, then tracing it from there. But it's that initial design creation. Even like one of the great artists that I was going to for a while before she moved to Calgary, I like went in and chose a tattoo off the wall, the little flash thing, but it didn't quite like fit in exactly where I wanted it in amongst my other tattoos. So she quickly just sort of redrew it when it's like a slightly different perspective so that it fit perfectly within my existing tattoos. And like, to me, that's artistry. That was incredible. And then to just go and like bang out like some perfect lines after that too. It was very cool. So anyway, I've been getting massive amounts of delight from that. If anything, within like this week, I've had to dial it back a little bit because I've been spending too much time just doodling away. But
no way, dude. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Ride
very
that
fun.
dopamine wave while it's still working for you.
Cool. Yeah. How about you? What's been bringing you delight?
This week, I delighted in another human interaction at the driving range. I walked in and I said to the old boy who's always there, I said, because he was watching, I don't know what was on, some golf. I said, "You've been watching the TGL?" And then he was like, "Yeah, I watched some of it, but it's not accurate enough. Like, they got to do something about that." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what do you mean?" And he goes on to tell me about the first Jupiter Lynx game, Tigers match, where he flew the green by 20 yards. And then this guy's saying, he's like, "Yeah, Tiger on a par 3, flying the green by 20 yards. He probably hasn't done that since he was 10 years old." Right. Like,
yeah.
And then I said, "Oh yeah. Well, I hear that they're using Tiger's launch monitors." And then the guy like lost it and was like, "Oh, well, that's why.
Oh, that's
But
funny.
I had read that is an issue. Instead of using the top of the line like SkyTrack or TrackMan, they're using a launch monitor that Tiger's vested in. And there might be like a contract with TGL that they can't change, but it's like universally known that the readings are a little wonky. So that kind of hurts the legitimacy of the whole thing.
For sure.
My understanding is that the public reception is greater than maybe they thought it was going to be. They're getting about 1 million viewers per episode. But yeah, they want to eventually be able to bet on it, and they won't bet on something that's not accurate enough. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fun. I saw a little clip that the match last night was a good one, and it was close. Went to extra time or something.
Yeah, that was a coveted match too because it was Tiger against Rory.
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter Lynx versus Boston Commons. I don't know what the result ended in, but yeah. So by popular demand, we're bringing back the Dream/Nightmare blunt rotation. We got 10,000 plus views on our last one, so let's see if we can compete with that. Do we
We're
start
here
with
just shills for the algorithm, so let's do it.
Yes, dude, we are algos flat. I'm going to answer the call of the void and jump off an 11-story building. Dev is going to make outrage content about elongated muskrat and Trump and Dream/Nightmare blunt rotation.
Yeah.
Nightmare or Dream? Who starts?
I can do Nightmare. Mine might be obvious, but my Nightmare blunt rotation would be Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, and Jordan Peterson, and we're in a back room at a Trump rally. That would be my current nightmare.
That's like if someone asks you to list 3 scary things and you're like vampire, werewolf, ghost. Yeah, like yeah,
I did. But I was just picturing, like, I don't know, Elon just like frothing away in the corner, probably Zuck and JP just like broing down on some super toxic alpha masculinity bullshit. Yeah, to the sound of YMCA playing in the distance as Trump makes his way on stage.
People who I care and respect listened to the Jordan Peterson Pierre Polyev interview and said that it had some smart parts in it.
Yeah, it really helps when you have nobody there to ask any like questions or critique any logic or fact check anything. It's the one thing that I actually originally had old Pierre on the list and then I changed it to Jordan Peterson in the last second. But I've been finding the like clickbait, rage bait, like smarmy, smirky Polyev clips lately so frustrating, particularly when he's dealing with like a slightly inept reporter. I don't know how people get their jobs or whether they're just like part of the sham, but the inability for somebody to retort or follow up their question that he kind of dances around and doesn't quite answer straightforward or honestly, like their reporting skills are so poor. Like I know I could do a better job and I have zero expertise. Like it's not that freaking hard. Like but they're just getting themselves caught in these little like typical, I don't know what to call them, but little trap, like conversation traps, that I don't know if did you ever watch that movie Frost versus Nixon? It's really good. You should watch it. But Nixon was known for being this, like, he could just like dance his way around questions and would just like ramble on and on and on. So you couldn't get a proper question in and would take the discussion in a completely different direction instead of answering the question that you wanted him to. And it takes skill of a reporter to like trap the person conversing within a conversation to have to answer the question properly, and none of these people are doing that. It's like extremely poor reporting, and I'm finding it very, very frustrating because he just comes off as this like smirky like, oh, look at me, one up the media. And it's like
good point. Yeah, because he's just basically rude to them. But you're right, they're not asking succinct questions, and then he's rude to them. And
the follow-ups are so
good.
The follow-ups are so pathetic. I'm like, there's a clear response here for what you should say to force him to continue to like either double down on what he's saying or whatever, and they're just so weak. It's brutal.
For my dream blunt rotation, I went a little thematic. I had a country in mind, like honky tonk, So.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like a specific country, like
not a specific country, like a cowboy country, like Western country.
Right.
First on the docket, we're going to go with Coulter Wall, Canadian country folk singer. I like him because I think he's super smart and has all of the right ideas, but isn't out there. He's not in the media running his mouth, but in the few clips where he's asked a question, he's super bright. I also like how the biggest names in the world want to collaborate with him. Like Post Malone tells a story about inviting Coulter Wall down to his place in LA to do a recording, and Coulter's like, you can come up to the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And I particularly like him too because he lives on a ranch in Saskatchewan. His dad was the premier of Saskatchewan, Brad Wall, and
I
he
didn't
was
know. Funny.
a really well liked premier, like a beer drinking man's man country boy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Coulter Wall. I bet he could drain a pretty good doobie too. Up next, he's going to pass it to Taylor Sheridan. In the last 2 weeks, the only shows I've watched on TV are like written, directed, produced by Taylor Sheridan. He's made every show on TV, if you didn't know.
I don't
It's
even
kind
know
of
who this
a,
person is.
yeah. So it's kind of a cool story. First of all, before including him on my list, I looked up his political leanings, and apparently it's really common. Like so many people Google Taylor Sheridan political leanings, and he's not starkly in one direction, or at least he hasn't come out to say it, but he's not a Trump supporter. So that's why he's allowed to be in my dream rotation.
Nice.
Yeah, so he wrote, directed, produced Yellowstone, Lawman Bass Reeves, 1923, 1883. Um, what's the other one? That one with Jeremy Renner, like every show on Paramount. Lioness, that new one. They're kind of like a little soap opera-y, but great shows.
Mm-hmm.
I heard this story that I don't know. I don't remember that story. Oh yeah. Here's another cool anecdote. So Taylor Sheridan, top of the world. Like I think he had success later in his career too. So has the success of Yellowstone, buys the $200 million ranch that Yellowstone is filmed on, rents the place back to Paramount Pictures to film his show on his property, casts himself in his own show, asks Bella Hadid to play his wife in his own show. Oh man, I don't know. Okay, so then he passes it over to legendary Canadian comedian Tom Green. I don't know if you remember My Bum is on the Rail.
Daddy, would you like some sausage?
Yeah, so a hilarious guy. Recently, within the last couple of years, he made the decision to leave Los Angeles to move back to a farm in his hometown near Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book, and right now he's public on social media talking about how that lifestyle change that he made is like the greatest thing that's ever happened to him. And that just falls in line with everything that we've been talking about lately. And yeah, Tom Green, cool guy. We would be smoking at Coulter Wall's Ranch in
Sick.
Saskatchewan. My goal for next week is to kick your ass at golf.
I hope you do. That would be fun to watch.
No,
I'm very much looking forward to it.
yeah,
Even though I was inspired by your episode last week to move a bit, I haven't really done that yet. I've been very much distracted with this like job hunt and stuff like that, but I'm excited to disconnect from reality a little bit, come over to the island to get some fresh sea air and swing
yeah,
a
dude.
golf club with my best friend. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, that's just a few days away on Friday.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, what's your goal?
Yeah. Um, that my goal is movement. So I'm gonna come there and move my body, swing a golf club, walk around a
Amazing.
golf course. Should be great.
That commences the 2 hour long podcast. I feel brain dead and I need to go get some movement and swing some clubs.
Yeah, totally, man. Enjoy.
Okay. Thanks, dude.
Yeah. Thanks.